tell me, did when you grew up, were you a particular lover of the horror genre? Were those the first kind of movies that struck to you, or?
No, I mean, what's funny is that I loved two kind of movies growing up, and I was kind of the boring kid that watched a lot of dramas and foreign films, and then but then on a weekend, I never loved comedy, so what I did on Friday nights was rent horror films, and so that was kind of my relief. And so it was definitely like those two things were the things that, I loved, and I've watched, every single horror film that I, growing up that I could imagine. And so it was always something in the back of my mind that if I ever did a genre movie, that was going to be the movie, the kind of movie I made.
Yeah, what were the titles that got to you the most, that stayed with you?
Honestly, you said Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that definitely makes me happy because, that was, before anything else, like, that movie grabbed me the most as far as, like, I was growing up in Texas, I was a kid that was sweaty and, with a bunch of my friends in a van, driving around with nowhere to go. And so, like, when I was 12, 13, 15, like, it really felt like, oh my God, I'm seeing me and all my loser friends, and like trying to think what would we do if we were caught in that situation. So that movie, and then I lived in Austin for 6 years, so it was like, it was definitely, it hit the hardest. But other things, The Shining, the original The Exorcist. I mean, these were the kind of movies that really jumped out at me.
Yeah, and we're crazy about the original TCM on the show. We did a tribute to it, and we brought on the Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer, and we talk at length about that film. There's just something so kind of unrelenting about that film, and it's there in your film too. I mean, you feel it. It's there in its marrow. I mean, so congratulations on that, because I definitely sense that inspiration there.
No, I get blown away that people sometimes overlook that movie as just being kind of a slasher movie, because to me,
it's a lot more than that.
When you look at the way it was shot, you look at the sound design. I mean, the sound design particularly was something that I referenced a lot when Tom and Andy came together to do the score for the movie. That was a movie that I referenced in the sense that it almost has no score. It has no, it's like it's allowing, it allows the real sounds of those moments. The generator outside the house, like, that was always just what got me super excited. And I showed that clip multiple times to people, and saying that, like, you can do so much without having to hammer it home into the audience that, look, this is scary. Like, you can actually just create a world in which it is scary.
And actually the most graphic thing about the film is its title. I mean, that's absolutely it. And in a way, your film it's old school like that, because through the majority of it, I mean, it kind of is those bumps in the night that shock you, and the kind of paranoia that inspires in the characters, and it's just incredibly effective. Tell me about the basic plot of the film for those listeners out there that don't know.
I mean, basically what it's about is a couple that went to a friend's wedding, and they've known each other a long time, and he has kind of prepared himself to propose to her and then bring her back to his childhood summer home. And in his head, I think he imagines it's going to be this amazing kind of romantic evening, and what ends up happening is that you find out that she's actually, as the movie began, you realize that she said no. And yet they're kind of going to be stuck together in this house, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, together for one more night before they can drive back and figure out what they're going to do. And so what ends up happening is that you follow this couple as they enter this house, and then discover that there's some people, that some strangers that are kind of looking around for just the right house to attack someone. And so the movie is a very kind of fly on the wall, like, put you in the room experience as you watch this couple deal with what would you do if there were some people outside your house that wanted to take away your freedom and your life. Yeah,
and tell me how this project came to be, because this is your debut as a feature writer director. How how did this opportunity come about?
I mean, I wish I could say it was all part of some grandmaster plan, but the reality of it is that I've been incredibly lucky at a few different steps, and definitely lucky that people have responded to my writing and the way that I kind of look at film, and really it really was that story of I packed up my car and my '86 Honda and moved to Los Angeles in 2002. I'd never written a script. I'd studied some cinematography in college, but had no real aspirations of being a writer or director. And it was only when I came out here, within 6 months that I realized, I don't even want to do cinematography. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I really want to tell stories. And so I kind of had to figure out, okay, how do I learn to write scripts? So, I took my Word on my computer and kind of started, tapping out, a script, and a year later I started on another one, and then, 6 months later I started on another one and came up with the idea to write The Strangers, and entered it in a few contests and scored high enough, I guess, to get into the quarterfinals of the Academy Award Nichols Fellowship.
Yes.
And that's awesome.
It got me on a list of names of about 300 people, and my manager called me, and literally, a week later I quit my job and was a quote-unquote professional screenwriter. So it was really fast, considering I'd never had a meeting. And
right, that's incredible.
I'd never had a meeting. I'd never. I was so freaked out. I had to go, buy a sports coat because I figured that's what people wore in those kind of meetings, and it was a pretty terrifying experience. But at the same time, it was pretty exhilarating. And even then, I knew that I wasn't even going to try to direct, because I was I would get laughed out of the room. So, after that, I went and did a bunch of. Took all the meetings, got the lawyers, and learned all about the business. And then 2 years later, when they were looking for a director for The Strangers, I took a meeting, and suddenly all of a sudden they said, no, we want him to do it. And all of a sudden I went and bought Sidney Lumet's book on how to direct.
Yes.
And boned up on that. I think I did all right.
Well, yeah, ironically, we're paying tribute to Lumet next week, too, so we know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah. I have a question from the chat room.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Brian, we have a question from the chat room. It's actually a question that's been on my mind, too, for the last couple of weeks. And this is from Mike from Horror Movie Fans Radio. Is this film based on a true story?
I mean, basically, the film is based on several different things. When I was 12 years old, I went out and stayed at my grandmother's house. And I was, she lived in this small town in West Texas. And as I was leaving, I was packing up some stuff, and my dad said, do you want to take any books with you? And I said, yeah. And he went through his shelf of books, and he said, I'll take this with you. And he handed me Helter Skelter. And I was 12 years old at the time, didn't know who Charles Manson was, didn't know any of that stuff, but and I just kind of got really obsessed with the book, and what really stood out for me was not the Mansons. It wasn't Charles Manson and that whole thing, but it was how the book really detailed those nights of the murders. And I remember thinking to myself even then that while I know everything, I know all this stuff about Charles Manson and the newspapers and all that stuff, at the time of those murders, nobody in those houses had any idea what was going on.
Right.
They were just kind of victims, and so, at that early age, I started getting into the idea of putting yourself in victims, in the victim's point of view, and then, another big aspect is when I decided to start writing a horror film, I knew that I wanted to play with the idea of random violence. I knew I wanted to play with the idea of I was so sick of horror films in which you were constantly just, okay, so, someone's committing revenge because you ran them over in a car, or you built a house on an Indian burial ground.
Right.
I was like, none of those things happen to me. Like, I don't do any of those things. I don't do those kind of things. So I was like, what is it I do? And I was like, well, I come home and I go to bed and I hang out with my friends. And so I remembered back to when, around the time that I first read Helter Skelter, there was a moment in my life where I lived with my sister in a ranch house, very similar to the house that's in The Strangers, with my parents. And my parents went out of town, and it was me and my little sister, and I was like 10, 11. She was 7, 8, and there was a knock on the door, and some man was there, and he asked for some random name, and my little sister answered, and she said, no, nobody lives here, and they went on. And what we found out was these 3 or 4 guys were walking up and down the street, and anybody that didn't answer the door, they kicked in the door and stole everything. And so I started thinking about kind of turning that on their head and imagining what if a group of people were knocking on doors just with the idea to kill whoever answered the door. And so, those different things and
it's
the
very
idea.
Scary.
Yeah, I mean, I just, personally for me, there's, we see these obituaries, we see these news reports all the time, and we have the luxury of knowing, okay, that guy was a drug addict, or that guy, that guy was a disgruntled employee and he went in. But I always think about the fact that the people that it happened to may not have been given all that information. They just might have woken up in the middle of the night and there was somebody standing in their living room.
That is what's so frightening about it, is because sadly you can't imagine. You can 100% imagine it happening. And the scariest thing of all is the general concept, and it's there in the poster. It's that phrase, because you were home.
Yeah.
That's what's most scary about the film. We have a couple callers, and then I want to ask you about the screenwriting process, if I may. Let's see. I'm bring up a caller. It's an unknown area code. It says 111. Go ahead. 111, are you there?
Actually, I have some questions in the chat room.
Okay, let me bring up 703. 703, are you with us?
Yeah.
Hello?
703. Hey, 703, go right ahead. You have a question?
Am I live?
Yes, you're live. You have a question?
You're live. Are you on? I didn't know I was on. Okay, I have a question. Oh, okay. Oh my God, I didn't even know that was really me. That's so cool. I'm sorry.
It's my first time being on live stuff too, so
we're all nervous.
Yeah, we're all first day on the job.
Go ahead, 703. What do you got for us?
Okay, I'm really hyped to see this movie. Like, I really am, and like, I want to know: is it like really boring in the beginning, and then it gets scary, or is it like just scary?
Oh my God.
I
love the audacity of this question.
I like to think it's awesome the entire movie, but
I think it sounds like 80 minutes of nonstop awesome film. So
that's what it is. It's unrelenting. I mean, take it from me, man. I pull no punches with horror films because I love the genre so much. It is an unrelenting film. It's exactly what you want. I'm gonna be brave, and I'm gonna try one more phone call.
Okay, I got a question in the chat room though.
Okay, 508, you're on. Go ahead.
Wait, me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I'm really excited for this movie, and like me and a ton of other people on the IMDb message boards have been like really excited for this movie. And I have a question that a lot of people have. Is the original script that's been on the internet, is it like the same exact thing as what's going to be in the movie, or has it changed a little?
I mean, I don't know what the script is that's out there. I mean, I'll definitely say that in the editing room we definitely played with different aspects of it. You do whatever somebody once said a script is born, an idea is born when you write it, it dies when you shoot it, and it's reborn again when you edit it. And so So I guess like there's definitely lots of things that are kept in from the script, but and then there's other things that have changed, and I think some of those things have changed for the better. So I don't know. I haven't read the script that's on there. But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the things that are in the script are in the movie.
This is your first film. Don't you feel like a star? People are calling you, and they're nervous to speak to you, and it's happening right out of the gate.
I'm nervous for them to speak to you. Okay.
Jerry, you have a question in the chat room.
Well, is there a 503 on the line?
No. There's an unlisted number that I haven't been able to.
Okay.
To get
Well,
on the line.
I'm going to go ahead and ask this one then from our friend J-Link. In the chat room, and he has two questions, actually. He wanted to know, as a first-time director, how do you think the critic responses are going to affect you, if at all, for The Strangers?
I will be honest, a lot of people say they ignore the critics, and I do ignore the critics only for my own self-being. Like, you live and die by... this is my first time I ever make something, so it's you want everyone to love it. Every time I write a script, I send it off to my friends, my agents, my managers. You want them to all come back with, I love it.
Oh, of course.
And so, but that's not always going to happen. But, I think for me, I grew as a filmmaker regardless. So, I've kind of been saying the past couple of weeks, it's kind of like I turned in my term paper, and my professor's going to put a grade on it. And I'll deal with that grade, whether it's an A, B, C, D, or an F. And so, I do kind of ignore some of it because you can't please everybody. And I also I can't sit and cry every day I can't cry and then flip to another review and it's good and me be like, yay, I'm great. And then turn to the next one and be like, no, wait, I suck. So.
And also from that same caller, do you have an official website? Do you have a MySpace or a Facebook page that they can
I don't. I at one point in my life I had a MySpace page, and then I got off of it, and I've been reluctant to open up another one. Just because I don't. Because as a writer, I try to limit my amount of time on the internet because it can become something that keeps me from actually doing the job. So
yeah, I understand that all too well.
Yeah, so I've gotten to the point now where, I've limited myself on the internet as much as possible so that I concentrate on the work. And so having a MySpace page just didn't, or Facebook just didn't seem like
I understand completely.
It seems like it's a black hole that would suck me in, to be honest.
Yeah.
It is.
Bryan, tell me about. I want to ask you something about the screenwriting process. And you mentioned in the basic synopsis of the plot that this is a couple, he's proposing marriage and she's not ready, and there's some kind of tension, even though it's not absolutely defined within that relationship. Tell me, as a writer, as a dramatist, the benefit of crafting that kind of relationship as opposed to one that's just, a happy relationship, a hunky-dory kind of. What's the importance of them having a history like that?
I think that for me, it went to the idea of I have not been in a lot of, I've not been in a lot of situations in which I meet someone and an hour later we're in love, and so what I felt like was more identifiable was, especially at the time I was 26, 27 years old, and that's an age where people are getting into, or have been in relationships maybe since college, or you're thinking about getting married, or you're married already, and that really felt like something identifiable to me and the world that I was living in, and I felt like, a lot of times in these movies you end up with this ideal kind of look at what the world would turn out, and for me it was kind of like, I wanted the story to relate to everybody, and most people at that age, or I think, are looking for love or have love, or maybe are just confused, and I felt like it was another way to say, like, look, this isn't a dream world or an ideal world. This is real life, and what would you do if you were sitting next to the person that you care about the most? Yeah. And you're put in this situation. So, yeah. I guess that was to me the thing, is that I didn't want it. I didn't want this to be the kind of horror film where at the end of the movie the sun rises and now, James and Kristen have a new girlfriend and boyfriend. I wanted it to be about something that had hopefully a little bit more depth than that.
Yeah. And tell me about speaking of depth, I mean, in crafting the kind of the so-called villains of the piece, which are these three masked killers, essentially, was it important to keep them faceless, or did you have ideas about personalities that the three of them had, or did the actors bring any ideas for distinctive personalities?
I mean, always from the beginning, it was important for us to actually, especially with the actors, to talk about these people as real people. I didn't cast, just, the assistant director or whatever, some PA to be these people. It's like I wanted them to feel real because I didn't want this to ever be a movie where you could discard the idea that these are monsters or whatever. It's, I wanted you to see the little interactions they bring, the human characteristics, because while they are, faceless killers, at the end of the day, they're real people. And I think you go back to, the original Texas Chainsaw or Halloween or even the original Nightmare or Friday the 13th, where before the sequel started to really pound in, there was a human aspect to those killers. And so to me, I always thought it was crucial that you had that.
And another thing that struck me too, I want to get this in before maybe we'll take one more phone call and we'll let you off the hook, about the look of the film. Your cinematographer, I mean, he's very accomplished. I think his name is Peter Sova.
Peter Sova, yeah.
Yeah, he's done Donnie Brasco and early Levinson films. Tell me about that collaboration.
It was it was pretty amazing. I mean, the guy shot Diner, he shot Good Morning Vietnam. It's like, the thing that I was really looking for is I did not want a cinematographer that had shot tons of horror films, because I didn't think of it as, the actors I chose, the set, production designer and the cinematographer, I didn't want these people to be horror film guys so that it had this look. What I wanted it to do was recreate, what it's like inside your house. I mean, I was always saying, it's like when I wake up in the middle of the night, I turn on the light. I'm not turning on some fluorescent bulb and everything's green. It's like I turn on a 60-watt bulb next to my bed. And so I wanted to approach the film as a drama in which terrifying things happen. Mm-hmm. And I felt like if we did all that in the editing room, what we'd have is a potentially a really good horror film. So Peter was amazing because what he did is that he kept the film grounded, and he also kept me remembering always throughout the whole process, as I was kind of, getting overwhelmed as the first-time director, as we all do. He was such a mainstay on the set, somebody for me to lean on, and if he was able to turn to me and say, yeah, Barry Levinson felt the same thing 20 years ago, it made me feel a little bit better whenever I was, angry or confused or whatever. And I think that picking somebody like that is why I didn't want the film. I wanted the film to feel like the 70s in a kind of but not be overly that way. And so to have a guy that had actually shot films in the 70s helped that process quite a bit.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. Okay, one more phone call. We're taking it from 734 area code. Go ahead.
Hi, I would just want to know what you considered the most important thing to making an effective horror film.
I mean, to me, the most important thing as far as making an effective horror film, I think it's honestly is having the audience feel like they're inside the room. It's having the audience feel like they're within the space. Like the second, I enjoy Panic Room. I enjoy some of these movies with CGI and stuff like that. But so often that kind of stuff, whether I think it's beautiful or not, it pushes me to the point where I'm saying I'm watching a movie. And what I think effective horror films do, just like a great drama or whatever, is it makes you feel like, no, I'm in the room. And so the second you get an audience that feels that way, I think their own minds are working as well, and they're thinking of the worst possible scenario, and you're showing them, frightening images, and I think that those things come together really well. So that's my big thing. If I can get an audience in the room, then I think I can scare them.
Well, you speaking of audiences in the room, have you gauged audience reaction? Have you been to any of the previews?
I went to some of the previews. I haven't been to a final screening with the mix and everything, and I'm going on Friday. My fingers are crossed. I mean, it's such a nerve-wracking process. It really is like you want them to scream and feel exactly what you want, and so. There's no doubt there's going to be a rush. I mean, I've been in a theater a couple of times when the trailers played, and so that's been exciting. So I'm actually looking forward to Friday. And
it's a scary trailer.
No, it's a good trailer, man.
It's scary. It's a scary one.
They got a sense of what the movie was.
And it played like gangbusters last night. Let me tell you that's a dream audience right there that you had last night. The one that I attended. So is there anything coming up next for you, or are you just waiting to give birth to this baby and then holding out?
I mean, I think that I've been writing quite a bit, but I think for all of us it was kind of especially when we knew when the movie was going to come out and we knew we were about to count down on it. It was something where you're holding your breath and you're hoping, but I mean, I've been real fortunate to have had the time in the last year to get to work on some stories and some scripts that I'm pretty excited about, and I've what started as the first horror film I think could hopefully grow to be a several, because I do love the genre and I love those stories. So